Welcome, everyone. I'll begin by lighting some incense for the Roshi. I think Roshi would be happy to have the four great vows chanted, so I will chant them. If you would like to chant them on mute together, please do in Japanese once and then in the shortened English version once. Shigu Seigan Mon Shujo Muhen Seigan Do Bon no Mujin Seigan Dan Homon Muryo Seigan Gaku Butsudo Mujo Seiganjo. Numberless beings set free, endless delusion, let go, countless dharma, see through, peerless way, manifest. You may have noticed the calligraphy on the website page, Enichi, or Enichi-zan, the mountain of Enichi. This is the mountain name for Tofukuji and thus also for Fukushima Roshi when he served as the head abbot. So one of the ways of referring to him in this kind of a situation is Enichi Koyu Ken Fukushima Keido. Koyu Ken comes from that poem many of you know, huh? The mountain becomes even quieter or deeper still, huh? The mountain stillness deepens. Yama Sadani Yunari. Very freely translated, his name can now mean awakened wisdom, Enichi, huh? Ever deepening, Koyu Ken, huh? Fukushima Keido. That calligraphy is now in the Hermitage in Kyoto. When you go upstairs, many of you have been there, there used to be a painting of Shusan Shaka, Shakyamuni coming down the mountain of his awakening. A year or so ago, I changed it, and now we have this calligraphy of Fukushima Keido, Enichi Moro Moro no Yami o Yaburu, something like awakened wisdom, which is also the name of Tofukuji as a mountain. Huh? Awakened wisdom shatters all delusions. It's quite a powerful calligraphy of Fukushima Roshi. I don't know if you can call it a poem, but this is what I tried to write to express my feeling now and his legacy. Huh? Thorough training, tempered with broad, beaming smile, still smiling, all awake. It's marvelous now to see the struggling faces of previous decades now grinning in peace. Working together, we truly honor the Roshi by living out the rest of our lives, serving others, healthy, happy, and strong. As it happens, exactly 10 years ago to this day, I had just left Munich, a retreat I did there in Germany, to come to Budapest in Hungary for another retreat. By the way, that's where I am now. We just finished a retreat here a few hours ago. So pardon my rather ragged look. But exactly 10 days to the day, 10 years to the day, I got a message on my cell phone, one of the few times back then that I used it, a message from Fusako, my wife. She mentions Shin-san. He was one of the priests who trained at Tofukuji at the same time as me. Some of you may remember he came several times to Europe to serve as the jiki-jitsu, to carry the stick. And my wife had written with the cell phone, Shin-san called on his way to the monastery. Roshi just passed away on his birthday. My wife Fusako and my son Evan were in Kyoto at the time, so they were invited to the wake that night, and they could see his then rather emaciated body. But immediately it was clear to me in Hungary what I had to do, which is to continue what I was doing, to do the next retreat there and then the retreat in the Netherlands. There would be other memorial services I could go to, including this one. Today is a fine day, exactly 10 years later, for all of us to gather. Roshi, we've continued this living tradition as promised. And in faithfully continuing, have naturally gone beyond, broken new ground in your honor, truly bringing it home. Nowadays, you may be surprised, online retreats and Dharma talks. Just finished one a few hours ago, a physical retreat here in Hungary, but also hosted online by the Montreal, Mexico Sanghas, open to folks around the world. 2 more retreats coming up in March in Munich and the UK. Roshi, you're still smiling at the USA hosted Rohatsu we did in January, huh? A full week, pretty much the Tofukuji schedule. We also have a bi-weekly study group that is text as practice, meeting online for one-on-one with folks around the world, this COVID world. Smiles broadening around the globe. This memorial is also a fine time for us disciples of Fukushima Roshi to digest a few koans. I have picked a few for your consideration. At first, I intended to pass my time secluded deep in the mountains, but troubled by the unfinished koan of my teacher, I emerged and am now completing it for you. A monk asked, "What is this unfinished koan?" The master struck the monk and said, "What ancestors leave unfinished, descendants must deal with." Another one from Joshu, who, as many of you know, is the Roshi's favorite classic Zen master. A monk asked Joshu, "What's the point of the patriarchs coming from the West?" Joshu said, "That cypress tree in the garden." Later, one of his disciples said, "My late teacher, Joshu, had no such koan. Don't slander him." One more for the record. The flower sermon, the world-honored one at Vulture Peak to give a sermon, holds up a flower. Mahakashapa breaks into a smile. In our tradition, this is considered ugly. This koan about the transmission and lineage of Zen. Please consider well. Thorough training, tempered with broad, beaming smile, still smiling, all awake. As many of you know, socially, the Roshi could be brilliant, engaged, very funny. But in one-on-one, the traditional Dokusan or Sanzen, the Roshi never taught a thing. Here, his greatness shines. I want to thank you all for coming together online today, and also to Milan for hosting, and to Adam for the website. You are welcome to leave a message or a remembrance on our webpage. I'd like to now hand it back to Milan, perhaps to go through in the gallery or ask anyone if they would like to say a word. You're also free to just gasho if you prefer. And then we'll end with 5 more minutes of Zazen. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jeff. Did you want to broadcast that calligraphy picture that we were talking about the other day?
Sure, if you can do it. That's beyond me, but if you can do it, please do.
Yeah, I'd like to put this up on the screen, and maybe you can, give us a couple words about it. It's this thing that we were looking at. Oops. Here. Can you all see that?
There it is, yeah.
Yes.
So, enichi, moro moro yami o yaburu. And on the right, you can see tofuku koyu donin. So he could be called Tofuku, of course, from Tofukuji, but he could also be called Enichi, which are the top 2 large characters. Again, the mountain name for Tofukuji. Thank you, Milan.
Sure thing. So at this time, if I think we should do this popcorn style. So at this time, if anyone would like to say a word, or comment, or just say hello to the group, please feel free to take yourselves off mute and go ahead and do that. But be mindful of the time, maybe just a couple minutes per person, since we have so many people. So please, the floor is yours.
I have a quick one about cypress trees that a lot of people don't know. When Roshi was abbot of all of Tofukuji, he invited a lot of other priests from a lot of other temples and a lot of other monasteries to accompany him to China to try and discover what had been the original monastery of Joshu. And when he arrived there, there was very little. a few broken down buildings. Jeff, I think you went on this trip. I'm not sure about that.
No.
But he found only a few broken down buildings, and he came back to Japan and he raised quite a lot of money. And he went back to China with that and some important priests. And Jeff, please fill in if there's something that you'd like to. And he gave that freely to the local government to try and reestablish the monastery there. And Baolin, is that the name of it in Chinese? And when I finally went back with one of the wonderful disciples who's already passed, Jimu, Teo, and we went in search of that and the original Linchi monastery. And what we found there was an enormous monastery capable of hosting 10,000 people. And what remained in the center of the courtyard were ancient 1,000-year-old cypress trees.
I'm glad you found it. I tried when I was in China, 2005. I tried to find that monastery. I never could. I went with my translator friend, a former student, Ted Berger. But we found another monastery in China, which was equally beautiful, but in the city. But yeah, Keido talked a lot about his work in China and the money that he was reading. And he had a big panel of photographs in his office that he let me see when I was there. So that's my connection with that.
I think it's called Baolin, and there's a website.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
But it's in the mountain, isn't it?
No,
It's not.
no, it's, if you, actually, you can look for the bridge, which is a global national heritage. And it's within walking distance of the bridge.
Okay.
And you can feel free to pass over.
That's amazing because I found another Baolin, another monastery by the same name, but
Huh?
it's in town.
Well, I think there is a town around it, but I mean, it's by no means a city.
No, no.
And it's not far from the Linchi monastery, which had not been rebuilt at the time that we visited it, but was surprisingly modest and very moving.
Okay. Well, since I have the floor, let me say a few words about Keido Fukushima, whom I know as Gensho. And at 78, I'm struggling with Parkinson's. My left arm is shakes. So I have a special connection with Gensho, I suppose. But I remember very fondly, and now I remember you have in Claremont, now that you talk, that I had fond memories of Gensho taking him to eat pizza at Shakey's Pizza, where he told koan stories to all of us who went. But he was always a smiling, always happy. And that's why I titled my book, The Laughing Buddha of Tofukuji. Actually, he liked that title, and he'd agreed that humor is the heart of Zen, very much heart of Zen. That if you have Zen experience, you should be happy and tranquil and calm and quiet. So I hope to achieve that someday. I'm very far from it, but I miss him a lot.
To share a fun story. I did a November retreat at Tofukuji one year, and that that retreat was always difficult for me because of the temperature, and I caught a cold one time, and I had a lot of difficulty with that particular time of year. But I finished one retreat not feeling sick and having gotten through it. And I went to meet the Roshi after you know the retreat was over, before I left. And he looked at me and he said, "Nice face." I was beaming, I was smiling, I was so happy I got through it without difficulty. You know, it was difficult, but without, you know, hurting myself somehow. And I said, "Thank you very much. I had a really nice retreat." He said, "Was anything difficult for you?" And I said, "Yeah, how is it possible?" Actually, you know what, I realize now this must have been a June retreat, because what was difficult for me was the mosquitoes. So I said, "Yeah, sitting in the Zendo and letting mosquitoes bite me is just torture for me. How do I handle that?" And he said, "The mosquitoes are my friends." No, I still have not lived up to that. He set the bar too high for me on that.
Tofukuji mosquitoes are famous.
I wanted to also share a story from the book of lectures from Fukushima Roshi that my husband and I collected. And that is about that trip to one of the trips to China, maybe one of the first trips, his first visit to Joshu's temple. Because for me, it really helped personify and make actually human the practice of the ancestors. There was one aged Zen priest among us, more than 70 years old, which I am now. He went up to the tower and started hitting the base of the tower with both his fists. He was crying out in a very loud voice, "This dirty old SOB Joshu." Everyone was surprised, including me, but I quickly realized what he meant and what he was trying to do. The old priest was in fact offering words of very high praise. A Rinzai Zen priest is only born through Joshu's Mu Koan. Without it, there would be no Rinzai Zen priest. So we have to be very grateful to Joshu for this Mu Koan. When I myself was actually trying to understand the Mu Koan, I felt exactly the way the old priest did. And there is a section here where he describes all of them beginning to chant at Joshu's temple, and you couldn't tell whether the priests were chanting or crying. And we don't see much of that expression of emotion. And just so it really moved me. And I have to say that there were several times that I was directed to meet Fukushima Roshi. And it wasn't until the third time that I said, "Wait a minute, that's the third time his name has come to me. I need to go there." And it was only years later that I found out that his birthday was in fact March 1st. It was the same birthday my father had, and my father had died when I was 6. I did not know this when I met Fukushima Roshi, and was just as moved when he died on that same day. Very personal. Thank you.
There's an addendum. Thank you, Grace. There's an addendum to that man pounding on the memorial, which was that he also said, "How many times have I gone into the dark cave to try to find you?" and burst into tears.
Fukushima did?
No, the monk,
Oh, man.
the monk that had gone with him on that particular trip.
Yeah. And we don't hear that part of the tears so much, you know, when the ancestors are so exalted. So that was very meaningful to me.
If you go to Joshu's temple, sorry, I just wanted to mention, if you go to Joshu's temple today, there's a big scroll of picture, and Fukushima is in the center of the picture with a lot of monks. And there's a caption there that when he went there, he yelled with his loud voice, "Moo," looking at the Joshu's pagoda. I got locked into the pagoda one night and spent a hallucinating night by thinking about Joshu's move. Sorry to interrupt.
I was just going to share an anecdote of one of my, maybe it was my last time meeting him, and it was one of those post Dokusan interviews. This was a point at which he was quite ill, and I was visiting Kyoto, and kind of ambivalent about whether to even ask to see him for Dokusan. It was not during sesshin, it was just to see him and present the koan I was working on. And he said, no, it's, please come. And before I left Kyoto, I went for tea. Many of us, if not all of us, have had that experience of his warmth and humor in those informal settings. And Jeff, you referred to that. And if I had had the experience a number of times in Dokusan where I would offer what I had to offer, and he would maybe tilt his head a little bit and say, it's okay, but there's a better answer. And he would ring the bell and out I would go. And I asked him, he was talking about his Parkinson's, and he said, as we were having tea, that it was his last koan, he thought. And I said, do you know the answer? And he looked at me, he said, I think so, but maybe there's a better answer. And that was it.
I'll say a word. I was Roshi's English teacher that year that he was in Claremont. And I remember what my assignment was. I was told that he had had an awakening experience and that his master had sent him to the United States to brush up on his English and to learn about America. Because you couldn't actually live the enlightened life except with your feet on the ground in all circumstances. So my job was to take him to Baskin Robbins, take him to see The Sound of Music, take him to Sunset Strip, let him meet college students who had no respect whatsoever for Zen priests, and take it all in. But I would teach him English by asking about Zen. That was our way. And he taught me so much. And I remember those years meditating too. I remember many of you. I remember Hap. I remember Ishwar. Hap, I was so jealous of you. Of course, in a Buddhist way. Because you could do Zazen so well. And you got to receive the stick in a vigorous way because he knew how serious you were. And I half wanted to receive the stick in that serious way, but half didn't. I think Roshi knew how to meet everyone for who they were and where they were. And that included me. So many stories, and I won't tell any, or just one. So we're driving in my green Volkswagen in Claremont one day, and we pass a yard, and there's this beautiful Labrador retriever with a big bone in his mouth. And he is running from one side of the yard to another side of the yard to bury that bone. And he is single-minded and fully embodied in that act. And Roshi says to me, see that dog? Yeah, Zen master. And that's where I got the feeling that Zen was, among other things, about being fully yourself and fully present to your life in whatever circumstance. Which takes me to Jeff. I want to express my gratitude to Jeff and the way that he has extended the legacy of the person who means so much to us. And I want to thank Jeff for a lot. And that includes the remarkable saying on his website from a lecture of his, where he says, when you are truly without self, it is apparent that all is without self. Realizing this precious dignity of each and everything is manifest. And what I actually have a feeling of right now is the precious dignity, not only of Roshi, but each of you, for what you've done in your way to carry that memory into your life now and to be at this event with us. So hi, Roshi. We're all trying to be that dog, each in our way.
Jay, I'd like to make a comment. You did a good job. You must have done a good job teaching Gensho English, because many years later, I was traveling in Japan to a place called Shingu, and I happened to be in a Buddhist temple, and the priest asked me, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm staying at Tofukuji Monastery." Who said, "Oh, there is a Zen monk who speaks very good English there." So you did a good job.
Well, thank you for saying that. Thank you, Ishwar.
Sure. Good to see you.
So I guess I want to give a little bit of my backstory and then about my encounter with the Roshi. So at one point, I think when Jeff started doing retreats in the States, because I was with another Sangha and I was doing their retreats, he asked me if I would help him with his retreats. That was, I don't know, in 2000, I think. And so I began helping Jeff with his retreats in the States. And some of you, I know many of you, because I was at the retreats, or I would send you emails. And so I was doing that. And then at one point it dawned on me, well, if I'm going to be really helping, I'd better go to Japan and find out what's what. So I hadn't met the Roshi, but I took all my belongings that I had at the time, not all my belongings, but what I needed to have to get to Japan. And I went to Japan, didn't speak a word of Japanese, but I stayed at, I think the Hermitage was there at the time. I think I stayed at the Hermitage. And I said to Jeff, so, I have never, been at the monastery. I've never really done a koan with the Roshi. What should I do? Is there anything I should do? And Jeff said to me, don't say the same thing twice. That was the one thing that I remember. So Roshi, I had a koan and I went, you had to go 35 times. And I said 35 different things, anything. And he would look at me, he would ring the bell, he would say, good. No, that's not really. And I wonder what he thought what I was up to, because I was really just trying to get through it, sort of. And Alex Bougie is here, I think. Are you out? Alex was there, and I think, was that where Pia was at that retreat as well, maybe? So I think there were people that were there, and so at the end of it, he passed me, I think, or at least I got the paper of some sort, and I was so grateful. I was so touched by him, and by that experience. It was just, it's stayed with, it's a seminal, that whole time with Alex there, watching Jeff come and go, Pia being there. It was just, a magnificent experience. And for me, it still sort of chokes me up when I think about it. And then because I am a family member, when the Roshi came to the States, I would have dinner with him and with Jeff and, the rest of the family members. Fusako is here, so with Fusako and Jeff. So it was, I got to know him not as personally as the rest of you did, but I got to know him. In fact, there's a picture of Jeff and the Roshi at the Washington Monument, and also another family member and the Roshi at the Washington Monument. So I think we must have gone, because I was there, I think we must have gone traveling at some point or another with the Roshi down to DC. So I was, thinking about him is beautiful. And then the legacy, of course, of keeping his work going, and all of the amazing people that I have met. I know just about every single one of you because of having helped Jeff in the retreats and having gone to Tofukuji. So it has been an amazing journey. And I think, what Peter Sharson said, I hope at my death, if I have time to reflect, if I am dying of something, that will be my last koan. And I wonder how I will do. I mean, I wonder, that's important. Anyway, thank you all.
Well, I just want to say hello. I have never met Fukushima Roshi. Jeff invited me because I've been practicing with him. So I just want to say I'm happy and proud and humbled by the fact that I'm part of this congregation, and yeah, that well, I'm not so much younger than you, but anyway, I will try to continue the way that you've been going. So thank you all for being here and for letting me be here.
Bernhard, I don't know you in that we have not met, but if you've come to this through Jeff, which I'm guessing you have,
Yes.
you could not have possibly chosen a better teacher.
Just as someone who didn't know the Roshi as well personally as so many of you obviously did, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my experience of Dokusan and the last few years of the Roshi teaching, right at the end of his teaching career, and how nice it was to line up in Tofukuji. I was often behind Tim Armacost in the line, and Tim was really good at sitting seiza. For 1 hour he could sit happily on the tatami and seiza. It used to drive me crazy. But the walk of shame barefoot over the tatami into the dokusan room, trembling, and then sitting in front of that huge infinitely high wall with nowhere to get a finger hold, and then the bell ringing and turning away, tears in my eyes, defeated once again. What a wonderful experience that was. So thanks to the Roshi and thanks to his memory.
I want to share a word about Keido Fukushima's calligraphy. I was at Tofukuji once and we were talking about how much money does he get for his calligraphy. I simply asked him and he said, well, about $10,000. And I was shocked. And he said that before his calligraphy is finished, his temples have already asked for it. So he was really a well-known calligrapher in Japan. I don't know if you know that he did at least one calligraphy in English, and that was thanking me when he came to College of Worcester, when I organized his lecture and he did a calligraphy session. And he wrote in his calligraphy, "Thank you, Dr. Harris." And that's my prized possession.
Lovely. Yeah. So here's a laughing story about the Roshi. Some of you have been to Tofukuji and you may have remembered that there's a national treasure there in the form of a, I think it's a 3-tier pagoda. And on a very, very cold period of the year, Teo and Jim and I were all getting frostbitten. And so in the morning when we go out sweeping, we would collect the twigs and whatnot. And we dug a pit outside of our little tea house and we'd throw the stuff into trash and garbage that could be burned. And then we'd light it and we'd warm our hands and try and warm ourselves up a little bit. And then we'd stomp on it and put it out. And we're very careful about all of this. And then we'd go off to breakfast or whatever the next thing was. And I think it was just breakfast at that point. And then we'd come back and change into work clothes or whatever it was that was going to happen. Well, one morning we threw some stuff in there and there was a little, just like a little tiny piece of bamboo. And the thing about lighting bamboo is that it becomes a coal. It becomes a little coal very easily and doesn't go out easily. It's kind of like an ego. And so we went off to breakfast and we came back and that bamboo ego had just decided to assert itself. And the whole grass plain around the pagoda was on fire. And so Teo and I were like pounding on this, running back and forth on the edge of this. And I can't remember exactly how it all went, but it was panic. At which point, Fukushima comes running toward us. And there is a sort of a seated fire engine. It was like this gigantic metal hose. And he was laughing hysterically, ran to this thing, got into it, pulled some levers, turned some things, and turned on this incredible blast of water and wet down the whole national treasure. And then he turned it around and sprayed out the fire, which was advancing toward this thing. And I don't know, Teo, remind me if I'm incorrect here, but I don't think he ever stopped laughing. I think he laughed through the whole thing. And when it was all over with, we were, humiliated and guilt-ridden. And it was like, oh my, it's not enough to be a terrible monk and not do this correctly. We're about to burn down a national treasure of Japan. And Roshi comes over to us and he says, I've always wanted to run that thing. I've always wanted to turn on that hose. Isn't it fabulous? There's a lesson about living in the present. I see Jeff grinning about that one.
I think Tofukuji did burn down a long time ago once. There was a fire. I don't know which century it was in.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is a national treasure for sure.
Mhm.
I remember many times I came back from downtown to turn off the heater he had given me, in my room because I forgot whether I turned it off or I didn't turn it off. And he said, make sure you turn it off, otherwise you're gonna burn down Tofukuji if the heater catches fire. And I was so scared. So I can relate to that fire story.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's wonderful to be invited here and to hear all the connections and to feel all the laughter. I'm sure that the dog who had that bone, I'm sure that his tail was wagging, and I will remember the smile that's come through the Zoom together. So great to be here.
Yeah, good to be here.
Welcome.
Well, it's been an hour now, Milan. Shall we have another sit if no one else has anything else they'd like to say?
In that case, let us sit together for another 5 minutes and then turn it back over to Jeff to close. Okay, Jeff, feel free to unmute.
Thank you all. It's been a fitting memorial for our Roshi. I hope you will all keep in touch. It's wonderful to have touched base like this. Thank you all.